Dear Lord, thank you so much for allowing us to gather and worship you. I pray you use our difficult relationships to bring honor and glory to you. I pray these difficult relationships make us wiser and more discerning and shape us to be more like you. You quench our thirst. You give us our daily bread. You give us the air we breathe. We know you will give us what we need when we need it, and we need not worry. If something is in our hearts that needs to be removed, reveal that to us so that we may repent. We so love you. Please accept our hearts and minds as we study your word. In your name I pray. Amen. So I once, years ago, I had to have a skirt, a very specific skirt that I needed for a job. And, they were like, oh, it has to be this long, it has to be black, like all that stuff. Like anyone that's done choir, orchestra, band, something like that, you're familiar with like those types of requirements. So I went searching. So I went to this store. I'm not someone that really likes to go to the mall. Like I'm not like a mall gal. And went to the mall, and I went into this one store that was slightly below what I would say is my age demographic. So there were a lot of people that were younger than me that were in this shop, but I was like, you're kind of desperate and you're looking everywhere. And so I found a skirt and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so great. And I go in, and the dressing room, I'm not kidding, is the size of this podium. It was so tiny. It's like one of those where you walk in and you have to like scoot all the way back to shut the door. Also, why did they make the door open in instead of out? Like, I can't figure that out. I don't understand when they make mistakes like that. So I'm in there, and I try this skirt on, and I was like, I just don't know, like you're looking. And so I thought, no, I don't think I'm going to get this. And so it's one of those that like zipped on the side, and I went to unzip it, only it didn't. And I was like, no big deal. And so then, like, has anyone done this move where you pull it around and move the zipper to the front? Because like you need to get it more. So I pull it around, and I'm like fooling with the zipper, nothing. And I was like, well, maybe some fabric is stuck. And so like I'm trying to figure it out. No fabric is stuck. And so then I'm starting to get the stress sweats, because I was like, this is a problem. And so then I was like, this is not, and I'm like frantically pulling the zipper, nothing. So then I thought, well, maybe I can pull the skirt down, like off of my body. Like maybe this will work. I have a bottom, and so it did not allow for that to happen. And so then I got the really, really bright idea to see if I could pull it over my head. So then like I get the skirt. Now all of this is happening in a dressing room that's like this size. And I couldn't help but think, the people that are in the dressing rooms next to me are probably going, what is she doing over there? And I am wrestling with this skirt. And so like I pull the skirt, and I get it, and obviously I have broad shoulders, and I get it like wedged so that it's like here and up. But now I don't have anything on down here. And I was like, well, now what? And so then I'm like frantically trying to get the skirt down. So I get the skirt down. So then I go out, and I'm like looking around, and there's like no one to help me. So then I walk all over the store. I find someone. And I was like, excuse me, I'm stuck in this skirt. And she's like, oh my gosh, you're stuck in the skirt. And I was like, yeah, that's why I whispered, because I wanted everyone to hear. And so she's like, well, let's see. So she's trying to do everything I did. So she's like, oh, let me see if I can get the zipper. And I'm like, oh, because I didn't think of using the zipper. And so she is like fiddling, and she was like, oh, this isn't going to work. So she goes, and she gets what literally looked like garden shears. They were the longest scissors known to mankind. And the scissors were like this long, and she gets the scissors, and we're close to the register, and she like walks towards me, and I was like, are you going to cut this off right here? Like in front of everyone? I was like, could we go back around like to the dressing room? Well, we wouldn't both fit in the dressing room because it's so small. So we're standing like in that little area with like a three-way mirror so I could see all angles of the skirt being cut off of me. And so she puts the scissors in and like cuts the whole skirt like all the way down, and I'm like holding it, and I was like, "Thank you." And then like I walk in and I hear like her little tiny little like teenage voice. She goes, "We've had so many problems with the zippers on those skirts. We should have just taken those off the floor." And I was like, "Exactly." And I mean, I just felt like embarrassment and rage, and I really felt like, okay, I'm stuck in this skirt. I'm embarrassed. This is a tough moment. But don't we kind of do that like with our emotions and our feelings? Like we can get stuck in something and not ask for someone to help us out of it. And just as joy can be a habit, discontent can be a habit, anger can be a habit, nagging can be a habit. And sometimes we have to just suck it up and go ask someone for help and say, "I can't do this on my own. Like, I can't get out of this. And what I'm stuck in, I'm going to have to get you to extradite my body out of like this that I'm stuck in." And you have to make sure that you first are praying about that, but that you're connected with other people, especially women, to say, who can I go to help me get out of this? And just because you know somebody doesn't necessarily make them trustworthy either. And so it's important that the person you're going to is rooted in the Word and they understand how to properly direct you. So the other thing is, a difficult person probably isn't going to be the person who meets your emotional needs. And so what happens a lot of times is we're not getting something from that difficult person that we want, and that's why we're upset. We're not getting something we want from them. It's not necessarily that they're being difficult. It's just we're not getting something that we want from them. Now, they could be difficult, and sometimes those things match up. But that's really important, that a difficult person, they're being difficult typically because they didn't receive something they needed as a child, or perhaps something has happened to them as an adult that you had absolutely nothing to do with. All you're doing is living in the moment and on the receiving end of something that has happened to them at some point in their life. And so you have to have those tools to figure out, how do I deal with them, but also take that step back and have that emotional distance to know, do I need to be looking to them to fulfill this emotional need? Is this something that's directed towards me? Or is this really something that's inside of them that, frankly, I feel like I could help them with, and I could step into kind of that messiness and that difficulty and help them? So does anyone want to share maybe a revealed flaw you have? Right, exactly. But like if I just said, "Oh, don't name any names, but tell me how your person is difficult," like how quick would everyone be? Like you'd be like, "Oh, my person's difficult because of this," or "They're emotionally unavailable," or, "They're difficult because they have an ego," or, it's like super fast for everyone to point out why someone else is being difficult. But when you're like, "Oh, tell me why you're being difficult," you're just like, "Well, I'm not going to say that in front of other people. I mean, I know why I'm difficult, but you don't want to say it, but I'll tell you mine." So for me, it's acceptance and just never, ever feeling like I'm good enough. And that kind of bled into a million bad decisions in life. And so what happens is when you don't feel good enough, you start looking for those ways to make yourself feel good enough. I wouldn't say I'm a jealous person, but I had my eyes on someone else's paper. I would just be like, "Oh gosh, that person is so smart. I wish someone thought that I was smart. Oh, wait, now I'm going to prove that I'm smart in this area," when nobody needed to hear anything from me. Or you would be like, "Oh, everyone seems to like that person for, the car that they drive. Well, I could get a car that's similar to that, and that'll say something. Or I could get a purse that says something to someone else. Or, look a particular way, and then maybe eventually someone will accept me. And what you realize is you're like, we're never going to be good enough. So I entered into an adulthood with an epic case of lack of confidence and just non-existent self-esteem. And it just led me down some really dumb choices. And then I ended up going and working for this company, and they had us fill out a personality test that was 75 pages long. Right. So everyone that was on my team, we all ended up doing this personality test, and we spent all day doing it. Like, they paid for this company to come in from Manhattan and have us work on this together. And then in front of everyone, they revealed everyone's results. Right. So it was like you're sitting there and they get to you and they reveal your results. And you're like, oh, yeah, I'm those things. Hard worker. Did everybody hear that? Like, you're so excited when they're talking about the things that you feel are good qualities about yourself. And then they get to the areas where you need to work on those things, and you want to crawl under a chair and just become invisible. And there's that little part of you that knows every single one of those things are true. And, you have to make a choice. Am I going to get better, or am I going to get better? And it was hugely embarrassing, not just for me, but really for everyone in there to hear all of the areas. But it also brought the team together, because then there was nowhere to hide. Like, it was just complete transparency. And all of us then talked about, like, oh, these are the things I need to work on. And, it was really obvious the things that hurt people's feelings, both guys and girls. But it was great because, you just really had that level of transparency. But I don't feel like we do that. Like, we are just like, I want you to see the best things about me. And then I just don't want to discuss the things I need to work on, and I want to hide the things I need to work on, and I don't want to be transparent. And what that can do is lead to make people feel like, oh, I don't really feel like I'm good enough to go to church. I'm good enough to come to Sunday school class. I'm not like all of those people. They have their act together. Raise your hand. Who has your act together? I mean, seriously, though. And so I just think that what we try to do is hold those things so closely, and we're not really showing, hey, we have some things that we need to work on ourselves. And so, again, it's like eyes on your own paper. But again, I realized I'm never going to be enough. I'm never going to be good enough. I'm never going to be enough. And as long as I'm looking to myself to define those things, I'm going to fail every single time. God is the only thing that's enough. And we have to make sure that that's what our focus is. But also, that's what we're showing other people is enough. And if we're trying to show other people that the ways that I'm good enough for you are all of these things, all of these pretty little things, we're not really showing people the ways that God is enough for all of us. So God's allowed someone super difficult in my life, and they have that quality, and it's a quality that probably hasn't been worked on. And then and I don't want to say it's uncontrolled, but it truly is a lack of self-awareness and uncontrolled. And it allowed me to see what that looks like by not working on that quality. And sometimes what happens is when we have a difficult person, they have a quality that we don't really like, but it's because we identify with it. And we don't like it, and we don't like it being displayed, but it's actually something that's inside of us as well. And that's why we notice it so quickly in them. And so when someone has it, it's really amplified, you can go, oh, that's what that can look like to someone else. But that person, God can use that difficult person to teach and stretch and grow in really uncomfortable ways. And so if you feel like that person in your life, your difficult person, whatever that quality might be that they have, you certainly need to kind of pause and see if that's maybe something that's inside of you that God's trying to work on, and He's allowed that difficult person in your life specifically for that reason that you think is so difficult. So, difficult people are often overburdened and under encouraged. And I have felt that way. And has anyone else in this room ever fallen into those categories? I mean, it's like a sea of moms and women and, daughters and people in school, like overburdened and under encouraged. Sometimes it's just like that tiny little piece that's like, wow, someone gave me a little respite. Like they gave me just a little breath of fresh air, and that's what I needed. And it's so great to get like that tiny bit of encouragement. And so we need to make sure that, like, when we're looking at that person, that they're being difficult, maybe those are the things, and you could step into those things. Sorry, I'm going to call you out, Janice, but I think Janice is really great at identifying with young moms, just saying, I can step into this season of life and ease this burden, if nothing but for an hour of playtime. I'm going to invite them over and just lessen their load just for a little bit of breathing room. Sit down, have this cup of coffee. You don't need to put it in the microwave. You don't need to reheat it. You don't need to forget it. Just come over to my house, have something to eat. And it's like, show up however you are, wearing whatever you are, and, let's just sit down and have a moment. And I think that we can look at that person that might be difficult and say, is that something I could step into, even though you might not necessarily want to? What we do sometimes is we offer excuses for our children and their behavior when it's less than desirable or appropriate. And we can say instantly what the reason is. Like, you can look at your child and you instantly know. And then a lot of times you tell other people why they're acting a certain way, because you sort of are like, I don't want anyone to think that I'm a bad mom, but what I want you to know is my kid is just sleepy. Or, hey everyone, he's just hungry. Or, oh, I think he's not feeling well. Or, whatever it is. It's like you're super quick to do those things. I completely stole the title of this class from this study. It is a 6-week study by Nancy DeMoss Wogglemuth. You got it. Thank you. Like, I YouTubed it, I bet, like 8 times, because I want to mispronounce it every single time. But it's living with difficult people in our life. It's a study on Abigail. This class is not at all what's in this book. However, it was the catalyst to do this class with some of the wisdom that was gleaned, and where I felt like the Holy Spirit was leading me in the Word so that we could translate it, because this book really is amazing. And if you all are looking for a more inductive study on this particular topic, you all can just go on there, get it off of Amazon, or I think it was like a Revive Our Hearts. I can't remember which one that I ordered. I think it was like $10. But there is a lot. There's homework in here. There's questions to answer. There's lots and lots of scripture. But it would be a great book. So in this, one thing that I did take from it is she has a Halt Method. Is anyone familiar with the Halt Method? Yeah. So it's, are you hungry, angry? I kind of plugged in afraid, because sometimes when I'm afraid or fearful, that's when I can lash out. Or lonely or tired. So halt. Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And I plugged in afraid, because a lot of times, like I said, that's kind of where I can get a little crazy. Once we bring awareness to the moment of the symptoms, we can also start to use self-control if this is something that we're doing. So again, we recognize these things in our kids. We tell people all the reasons why our kids are acting a certain way. But do you give adults those same excuses? Are you walking around like, oh, that person is being so difficult because they're lonely? Well, I mean, that just feels weird. But, oh, that adult's being so difficult because they're probably tired. Or, they're afraid, or something like that. Like, you're not labeling an adult. You're just saying, oh, they're being difficult and they should know better. But normally there is a reason why they're doing that. So when you have that difficult person, are you offering the fruit of the Spirit to them? Are you being gentle? Are you being kind to that difficult person? It's not just identifying that someone's being difficult. It's like, how are you treating the person that's being difficult? So if you find it hard to love the person out of your affection for the Lord. And that's important. So there are going to be people that are just difficult in your life, and they probably won't ever change. They're just going to be difficult. And your interaction with them is, for as long as you're around them, they're just going to be a difficult person. But again, if you find that person hard to love that person out of your affection for the Lord. Proverbs 25:28, a man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. So now think of the difficult person in your life. We often have the burden of healing from other people's wounds. So what happens is that person is difficult because they're trying to heal from something or not trying to heal from something, and we're on the receiving end, and they're being difficult, and we're like, oh, now I need to heal from something that happened to you. That's a big burden, and what we need to do is make sure that we're not passing those things along, whether it's generationally or just even in the next moment with the people that are in our circle of influence. That could mean that perhaps you have like a difficult parent that had a difficult parent. Well, that's going to be a harder thing that you need to heal from, and the responsibility of choosing to break that cycle. That's a little different than saying, I just was at Target and met someone that was like real snarky and I could walk away from them and I don't really need to carry that baggage with me. I can just kind of have a moment and then just be over it. So the responsibility is going to be pretty different in how you have to carry that. So, but we know the one who heals all the wounds. And so what we need to do is call on him, but then also direct other people towards him. What we'll also find is that for people who have children, they will protect their kids in a way around someone that's difficult within the family. And so what we also have to do is understand what that age-appropriate level of transparency is, but also allowing them to see that difficult relationships happen at a young age and the proper way to deal with those difficult relationships at a young age. Because if all you're doing is hiding that there's a difficult relationship and then all of a sudden they're 18 and now they're stepping into a dorm room and you've shielded them their whole life, what coping skills have you given them or tool set have you given them to deal with the difficult people or difficult relationships? So we're going to start in 1 Samuel 25. We finally got here. So the next 2 weeks, today and next week, we're going to be in 1 Samuel 25. There's going to be other places we're going to go, but this is going to be where we are. So I started to look up what names mean because the 1 Samuel 25 kind of starts out that way, and this was hilarious to me. I guess I just had never looked it up because Jennifer's like a really common name, and it means white wave. How funny is that? I was like unbelievable. So another thing about names, Tanya is my aunt, and I have a lot of people. This is a huge distraction, so we're going to get this out in the open, hopefully for the last time in my life. We're very close in age, and so we growing up together, and it was like the sweetest relationship because it didn't, but there was a sweetness to being so close because she was just old enough to not be inconvenienced, but to be wildly fun. And my sister and I are very close in age, and we just became the founding members of her fan club. And so, at a young age, my sister and I called her a nickname that just my sister and my cousin Christy and I would call her. And then that name ended up turning into Tanya. and she is my aunt. She's my mom's baby sister. And so we have always called her that. And she calls me Jenny. And so my family calls me Jenny. It's not really something that anyone else calls me. My husband doesn't even call me Jenny. He did it once, and I was like, what is that? Like, it sounded so weird. Like, it was like he called me the wrong name. So that, to me, is when I hear Jenny, I instantly have that recognition that it's like, this is someone that loves me. This is someone that knows me and loves me and has known me a very long time. It's the same thing. If she hears Tanya, she knows this is family. This is someone that has known me, that loves me in a familial way. And so when a lot of times people say, well, what should I call her? Call her Tanya. That is her name. My name is Jennifer. However, families have certain names that they call. And so I've had multiple people say, well, what should I call her? Call her her name. And that's Tanya. But I try to always correct myself when I'm in front of other people so that it isn't a distraction. But so are we all clear on that? Okay, good. Good. I'm glad we got that out of the way. Take a deep breath. Okay. So, but the point to all that is names mean something. They mean something to the people that say the names, the people that decide the names to give to people. They mean something. So in biblical times, names were given in a more intentional way. They were given to say something about someone's character. So David, we all know what David means. Beloved. I mean, we hear it over and over again. And he was known as a man after God's own heart. Nabal means full or folly. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty happy my parents didn't name me Nabal. But I also think that it's interesting that we know in biblical times that names were chosen to say something about someone's character. I would argue, it doesn't say this, that probably wasn't his birth name. That was probably a name that developed as he developed as a person. It would be strange for him to be like, oh, okay, we're going to name this baby Fool. Like, that would be weird. Now, it doesn't tell us exactly, so I'm not 100% sure, but that may have been a nickname like Jenny that may have come on, and we could closely associate that with Fool by some of the things I've done. However, like I said, so Nabal lived in Carmel. He was very wealthy. It shows us that in verse 2 and 3. He was a Calebite. He was surly. I thought that word surly, I want to bring that back into everyday vernacular. I like the sound of that word. And so I looked it up just to make sure I understood. It's bad-tempered or unfriendly, but surly, it really sounds like what it means. He was mean in his dealings. If you jump, not that you have to, but you can jump to verse 17. It says, he is such a wicked man that no one can talk to him. Like, how terrible is that? Could you imagine if someone said that about you all? Like, they're so wicked, no one could talk to them. I don't want that type of reputation. So other translations have said that he's a worthless man. Some translations have said no one can speak with him. And that is like no one can talk to him. And other translations said no one can speak with him. Those are awful. Those are absolutely awful things. So let's go to verse 4 through 9. Let me put my glasses on. David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So David sent 10 young men, and David said to the young men, go up to Carmel and go to Nabal and greet him in my name. And thus you shall greet him. Peace be to you. Peace be to your house. And peace be to all that you have. I hear that you have shears. Now your shepherds have been with us, and we did them no harm, and they missed nothing all the time they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore, let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we come on feast day. Please give whatever you have at hand to your servants and to your son David. When David's young men came, they said all this to Nabal in the name of David, and then they waited. So when studying, one thing we have to do, I don't have bifocal readers. I just can't see close up, so I have to keep taking them off and on, sorry. So when studying, what we have to do is have an awareness of culture, history, and context. And I don't know about you all, but I just don't really have context or reference for biblical sheep shearing. Like, that just isn't something that I have referenced. So I decided to start looking that up. And in biblical times, sheep shearing was a time of kind of celebration. It was a time of feasting and drinking and settling some scores. So at this time, it was sheep shearing time. David sent 10 young men to Nabal to greet him. David and his men had and protected Nabal's men from threat and injury. This came at a potential cost to David by protecting this, but Nabal benefited financially from not being attacked and losing his men and sheep. So then you partner that with sheep shearing time, and you're like, okay, they're celebrating, they're feasting, they're drinking, they're settling scores, people are paying back some debts that they owned. So when you look through the lens of appropriateness and historical context, there would have been plenty of food and drink to go around. And so probably, because there was a lot of food and drink, people were probably in a good mood. And they also were getting paid back some of the debts. So there's a certain sense of ease and celebration that people are going through during this time. So what exactly was David asking for? Snacks. I mean, he wanted some snacks. Like, he wanted hospitality. He was inviting himself over to something that was customary and available. It's not even like he was saying, hey, I know you're real busy preparing for your daughter's wedding, but let me invade your personal space and do this. Like, he's inviting himself into this celebration, and he had just protected everything that Nabal had during that season, and he suffered no loss. He's asking for something that could have freely been given. Does your difficult person ask for something that could freely be given of you, and you have a choice to make in that? So David sent some of his men to ask humbly, but also to remind Nabal they didn't cause him any harm. He had a reasonable request. David asked for something common and nothing outside of Nabal's means. So how did Nabal respond? Let's look at verse 10 and 11. And Nabal answered David's servants, "Who is David? Who is this son of Jesse? There are many servants these days who are breaking away from their master. Shall I take my bread and my water and my meal that I have killed for my shears and give it to men whom come from I don't know where?" I think we can pretty much assume this is the tone in this. Yeah. So the tone, it's sarcastic, it's rude. I also think that sometimes when people are like, oh, well, that was just a text or an email, I didn't mean for that to be rude. You can read rude, and let's just all in this room agree, passive-aggressive is aggressive-aggressive. We just got to cut that stuff out. I mean, tone can be read. It can be implied in the way that you word things. So when he's like, who is David? He's basically a movie star at this point. That's who David is. So when it's like, who is David? He knows who David is. Like, most people in this area know who David is. But what Nabal wanted to do was minimize him. With his words, he wanted to let everyone know that he thought he was someone small and did not miss that chance to minimize him. Nabal's response to the ask was basically incendiary. He just had a quick little sentence, but that really sent David into a place he shouldn't have gone in. So have you ever gotten upset by someone asking for something? I mean, seriously. How about when you're busy or you're tired or you're afraid and somebody's like, it's like that one additional thing that someone asked for. Has that made you difficult? So Nabal's mindset was scarcity versus abundance. My husband and I used to live in Asheville, North Carolina, and a lot of people are like, oh, that's so dreamy, it's so great. Well, let me tell you, like, living there is very different than vacationing there. And that is the case with most tourist places. And in most places that are tourism driven, there is a Grand Canyon gap between income levels. There are either jobs that are service industry jobs or the extreme opposite end, and there's just not a lot in between. It is a beautiful place to live, but there's a lot of tourists and a lot of poor people, and there's a homeless issue that's there that if you all have ever been to Asheville and you've been downtown, I'm sure that you all have experienced that, and it's only getting worse. And my husband and I went to a popular downtown place, and we decided that we were going to eat there. And I specifically chose that place because they gave really big portions, and I wanted leftovers because I wanted the second meal. I don't know if y'all have ever done that, where you're like, I want to get my money's worth, and so I want to be able to take something home. So the meal was like really great, and they put it in my to-go box, and I was like, I have leftovers. I have tomorrow's food. Like, I was so excited because, like, I, didn't have to cook, and I was just so excited that I had these leftovers. And so we take one step out of the restaurant, and there's a homeless couple that's there, and they ask for our leftovers. And my heart was instantly like, this was the whole reason I chose this restaurant. So, like, I looked down at my box and I was like, scarcity. Like, I looked down at, like, let's think about the word right here, leftovers, which implies what? Abundance. I had leftovers, and my mindset was scarcity. And I, like, gripped that box, and I was like, I had that little moment where I was like, I really want this. I don't want to give this. And I handed my leftovers over, but I knew what was in my heart. Like, my heart wasn't to freely give that to someone like, oh, sure, here you go. You can have this. Like, I'm not going to stand up here and lie. Like, no, I wanted what was in that box, and I did not want to hand it over. But I also, it's not like we were in the best financial situation, but we were far better than the financial situation that a homeless couple is in asking for our leftovers. And I still had such a tight little grip on that to-go box because I wanted those. And so I was like, we don't even have scarcity, and I'm holding on to this. So again, it's scarcity versus abundance. We had enough and more, but I still wanted to hold on to it. My heart was selfish. Do you have an abundance of kindness? Do you have an abundance of love? Will God give you those things to continuously supply those to your difficult person, no matter how difficult it is? Like, is his love and kindness abundance? Is his patience abundant? Like, he doesn't come from a place of scarcity when he's giving those things to you. Don't get in the mindset of scarcity when trying to give those to other people. So we also can look at Elijah and the widow from Zarephath. She gave all she had. In fact, she said in 1 Kings, I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son so that we may eat it and die. It's like every time I read that, you're like, that is dramatic. But, I love it because it gets your attention with how dramatic it is. The homeless couple wasn't presumably asking for our last meal. They just wanted our next one. And I think sometimes our difficult people can do that. What they're doing is they're not asking for all of what you have. They're just asking for the next portion. I just need the next kindness. I need your next patience. I need your next goodness. And that can be hard for us because we're holding on to those things. I don't have enough to give you. You have tapped that out. I don't have any more in that resource. I'm not going to give any more to you. Let's even go back to the garden. The serpent promised knowledge, but he promised it abundance. That's where it came from. So what we're wired to want more. Like, we're wired to just want more. And the first way that he got us was he tapped into us wanting more. And I think that's crazy. The serpent promised abundant knowledge. And instead, what did Adam and Eve get? They got scarcity. They got the opposite. And now, because of sin, we're wired for that too. That can be really confusing to us, that we are wired for abundance and scarcity, and these come from two different sources. One is going to come from sin, and one is going to come from God. But both of those are we're going to want more, and we have to have discernment to figure out where it's coming from and make sure that we understand that. So let's go back and read verse 11. I'm not asking you all to mark this, but just look at it for how Nabal's saying it. Shall I take my bread and my water and my meal that I killed for my shears and give it to men who came from I don't know where? So what do you hear? I, my, I, my, in one sentence. Just look at verse 11, how many times it jumps out. I, my, I. That kind of sounded like a haiku or something, didn't it? I was like, that was crazy. But isn't that what we do? That's basically what we sound like to God sometimes. When we're like, I, my, I, my. We're not talking about what's coming from him. We're talking about our own, what we view as our own sources and our own resources. So an entire generation, myself included, was ruined by the movie Jaws. I don't know who else was greatly affected by that movie, but we had never thought of sharks in that way before. And I was I was greatly affected by this movie. And I thought, I remember it, and it's so tightly woven into the thread of swimming and childhood, but I couldn't really remember what the year it came out. I was kind of shocked. 1975. I didn't realize it was 1975 that it came out. But it's a moment. You see dangly legs. You it's the music, that camera angle, everything combined is just tapping in. And literally generations later, we still feel that tension. Shark Week. Who in here will go to the ocean and swim out so far they can't touch the bottom? I still do it. Why? Right. I mean, because you're but would that have been the case had you not seen Jaws? If that was even... I would seriously say Shark Week wouldn't have existed had it not been because of Jaws. But, yes, I will swim so far out that I can't touch the bottom. And then, shockingly, there are sharks. And you are just oh. And these are in extraordinarily popular vacation destinations that all of us go to and visit. And you are just if people only knew what was out here. They are everywhere. And you're just they're fairly harmless. However, this movie has tapped into that thing, and we've passed this on to generations. Just looking out in this room, it's I see heads nodding from various generations because we all know what Jaws has done to us. It's destroyed us. So what happens is our past can kind of whisper to us, wait, in the past, this thing happened. You didn't have enough. You might not in this particular instance. And so what happens is we bring scarcity in, perhaps even stinginess. The unknown aspect of what is to come can make people do some crazy things. Or you can choose to trust God because you saw his goodness and the way he provided for you before. And that can't just be looking at it in tangible ways, I wanted macaroni and he provided macaroni for me. It needs to be in emotional ways. He gave me strength in this area. A lot of times what we do is we place a larger value on things that are our least valuable resources, such as money. We look at money as our most valuable resource that we have and the things that we can do with that, instead of looking at emotions and how we can love people and how we can show kindness and how we can be patient with people. We're not looking at those as resources and doling those out with the value that they truly have. So we should face challenges of the unknown, knowing and trusting the one who does know. When things feel unknown or unsure, it makes people difficult. Like that. What happens when a natural disaster happens? Like right now, the awful flooding that's happening in eastern Kentucky. We've stepped into some really difficult situations with disaster relief, and you're stepping in, and the flood's the reason that you're there. Because you're just like, okay, God has brought this flood, but now I get to step into this really difficult situation because this person feels helpless, but they're not hopeless because I have something that I can share with them. And if it means that I am tearing out drywall and removing belongings or brush or whatever it is, and that's the way I get to have a conversation, that's pretty amazing that I get to step into this really difficult moment. And frankly, with some people that can be really difficult because all of their emotions are really high. And so you have to say, believers should be more believable because we have a peace that passes all understanding and we know who holds the future. Right now in culture, there is more and more because I think there's more ways for everyone to stay fake connected. But are we really showing other people that we believe what we believe? I mean, or are the way we're acting towards people that are being difficult or have differing opinions from us, are we showing that, wait, I can believe this person because their action, their words, their deeds show they don't hold their future. Their peace isn't coming from what's happening around them. So again, as believers, we need to be believable. And I think some people have gotten a little off course. And so when you have a difficult person, if they're not also a believer, you have an even greater responsibility to that person to show them who God is. So scarcity versus abundance. In tone, Nabal's tone is worse than sarcastic. It was aggressive. So if you read 10 and 11 again, it's, who is David? Who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants these days who are breaking away from their master. Shall I take my bread and my water and my meat that I have killed for my shears and give it to my men who come from I do not know where? Proverbs 15:1. Soft words turn away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. David's response, this is intense. Verse 13. David said to his men, every man strap on his sword, and every man of them strapped on his sword. Do you see that? Like every man strapped on his sword. What'd they do? Immediately strap their sword on. David also strapped on his sword, and about 400 men went up after David, while 200 remained with the baggage. I like that word. Yikes. Did it stir David up? It felt like 0 to 60 when you're reading this. 1 minute, he's asking for snacks, and the next, he's literally ready to kill a human. And probably more than just one. Like, I want some snacks. You said no. Okay, I'm going to have to kill you. That's what we just read. That's crazy. So if you look at it, you go, okay, perhaps in context, if you're looking at, wow, Samuel just died. Could David's reaction be a culmination of things? Could it be the halt that we did? Could it be hunger? Could it be he's angry? Could it be he's lonely? He's tired? Kind of sounds like it's all those things that he could have been. Now, he lacked self-control and wisdom at that moment, but he obviously was experiencing all of those things. All of those things combined probably led him to exactly where he was. My husband and I did a trip numerous times to the Dominican Republic. And we often went with people that we did not know. And on one trip, we were there, and there was a woman that brought a ukulele to learn on the trip. a ukulele to learn. Now, alone, if there are lovers, it's nothing against your people. I'm just saying to learn, and that's like a flutophone. Like you've brought a flutophone to learn on a mission trip. That's weird. Now, on top of that, she was one of those people that every time you said something, she said, I know. And so you were just like, okay. Now, on this trip, we did 2 vacation Bible schools every day, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And at each vacation Bible school, we had 100 kids. Yeah. And in between the 2, we built a house. And we worked in concrete to build that house. And she had her ukulele all the time. Did not learn it, so it was not successful. And so what we would do is we would change our shirts because we're covered in concrete. We were like dirty from the waist down, which was really funny. But we would change our shirts into our Vacation Bible School shirts, and then we would play with these kids. You all know how intense this can be with Vacation Bible School. Change back out of that, finish like working on the house, and then we would go back, and then we would eat dinner, and then what we would have to do is get ready for Vacation Bible School the next day, which meant we were doing crafts for 200 kids because it was 100 kids at each one, and so we would stay up until about midnight every night working on these crafts, and they had to be crafts because there was a language barrier. And so we were staying up really late, and so we have, I know. I know. And I was like, and so just at one point, I just got up and I just walked away, and we were staying in this place that it was pretty sparse, but there was an empty closet. And so I just went, and I was like, I walked in that closet, and I shut that door, didn't even turn the light on, just sat down and just like had a little moment. And outside the door, it's like, and I hear her, I know. And I was like, oh. But I knew that in that moment, a harsh word could light a fire. Now, I would even argue, she didn't even know she was being difficult. She was like wildly obtuse, that she felt like all the things she was doing was received really well from everyone. She probably didn't know she was being difficult. I would argue some people don't know they're being difficult. Like their voice is your ukulele. Like just like hearing their voice is like, okay, I just need a moment to take a step back and just pause. I knew that if I stayed right next to her, I was like, I am hungry and tired, and you have made me angry, and I am going to be a Nabal in this moment. And I needed to just kind of excuse myself to just sit in that quiet little dank closet and just like gather my thoughts so that I could go back out there and like finish what I was supposed to do. And I didn't go all the way to the Dominican to like fuss at this woman, but I knew that I needed to take a step away. And also, we have to understand that just because we don't say something doesn't mean we aren't saying anything. I have an extremely expressive everything, like facial expression, but I'm going to tell a story with my whole body. Like, you're going to see it. You're going to feel it. Like, I'm just really expressive. My husband, you all saw him. He is not. But facial expression, body language, tone, they all play into language and response, and we cannot give ourselves a pass and say, well, I didn't say anything, so everything's good. Not saying something. Sometimes you are saying everything that you need to say. And if you don't believe me, has your mom ever given you a look in church when you were doing something you shouldn't do? She didn't have to say a word. All she had to do was be like, I'm going to murder you when you get in the car. And you knew that when you got in the car, your mom was probably going to murder you just by one look. So I just want to make sure that everyone's clear of that. So Matthew 12:34, you don't have to, just one verse, you don't have to turn there. You brood of vipers, how can you speak good when you are evil? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. Gosh, I can't speak. The mouth speaks what the heart is full of. If it comes out of your mouth, it was in your heart. And we need to fix our hearts. So we have to make sure that if we're responding unkindly or harshly to someone that's being difficult to us, and we feel that's the way that we need to respond, that might be something we need to address in our heart. So let's jump to verse 14 through 17. But one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, "Behold, David sent messengers out in the wilderness to greet our master, and he railed against them. Yet the men were very good to us, and we suffered no harm, and we did not miss anything." He's probably speaking really fast. "And we did not miss anything when we were in the fields, as long as we went with them. They were a wall to us both night and day. All the while we were with them keeping the sheep. Now, therefore, know this and consider what you should do. For harm is determined against our master and against all his house, and he is such a worthless man that one cannot speak to him." Ooh, he just spoke against his master there at the end. "But then in the meantime, while David is raising his sword and gathering his men," this is happening at the same time. So we get to see like this little moment in time, kind of like from all these angles. I like this verse. So like this nameless person plays this pivotal role. And there's this meme that goes around, drives me bonkers. I'm sorry if y'all use it. But I understand the intention behind it, so no one needs to send me a message after this class. But it's one of those that says like, "Sister, you're not powerful enough to stop God's plan." Like, I understand the intent behind that, but I think sometimes what happens is it removes our responsibility in that moment. Like, I understand I can't stop God's plan, but I also understand I can be a real jerk and maybe slow some things down or put some speed bumps in there or throw someone off course that shouldn't have been thrown off course. I have a responsibility in that moment with my word and action and deed. And although I understand that, we still have a responsibility in those moments. So the servant, I like it because he diffused the situation. He immediately was like, "I am seeking peace." He could have had a personal stake in it. We don't know. I mean, he probably didn't want to die. But we can assume he probably didn't want to, but it doesn't tell us. But he could have remained quiet. But the servant was seeking peace. And so we can be like this nameless servant and play a role as peacekeeper in a difficult situation with a difficult person. And so that can even be within our own family. Like, you might be like, "Oh, that's not my circus, that's not my monkeys," but it is your circus and those are your monkeys. And so you do have a role to step into that and just infuse whatever godly wisdom you can into that. And it doesn't mean that you get to sit back and just watch something burn to the ground and just be like, "Oh, well, isn't that awful that they're doing that over there?" You still have a responsibility. So we can be this nameless servant. So Abigail, she was a woman of discernment. He went to her because she thinks rationally. I want people to think that about me. I want people to be able to come to me because they go, "She thinks rationally. She's not wild and all over the place and foolish." And so don't you all want to be considered, like if someone's like, "I need to go to someone that thinks rationally," don't you want to be one of those people, not someone that's just wild and all over the place? Or, well, they're kind of apathetic. They don't really care. They just kind of like to sit back and eat their popcorn and just watch the dumpster fire. Like, I don't want to be that person either. So Abigail has some options. She's removed from the action. We're not sure how far out, like how far away David and his men are. She probably could have escaped. I mean, let's be real. She probably could have. She could have lashed out because she was fearful. We're also told that Nabal was an awful man. She could have grabbed her popcorn and said, "I want to watch this play out. Like, I want to watch my bad situation get handled." Like, she could have even chose something like that. I mean, we aren't really told, but she doesn't really act surprised when the servant's talking to her. So that kind of indicates to us that she knows her husband's a jerk. I mean, it's not, Like, we get all these other details, but it's not like, and she was very shocked that he acted like this when, it's like we're not told that. So, verse 18. Then Abigail made haste and took 200 loaves and 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep already prepared, and 5 sihas. Did I pronounce that correctly? I looked that up. Sihas? Yeah, sihas? Is that right? We're going to say that's right. Of parched grain and 100 clusters of raisins and 200 cakes of figs, and laid them on donkeys. What other women do we know that have made haste? Like, when you're thinking of the Bible, what other women? I think, like, we can look at Judges and go, Jael did. And I like to do this, like, weird Kentucky twist where I like to call her JL. And I can't figure out why I do that. And so then I was like, it's Yael. Like, the J isn't even pronounced. But then I would say that the English way would be Jael. But Sisera fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. We all know this story. And what we see is that she's offering him snacks. He's saying, I'm coming to you. I need some rest. She offers him snacks, and he lays down. And then she went softly to him and drove the peg into his temple. So Jael had to think fast and act fast. Her actions helped bring the beginning of the end of the Canaanites reigning over Israel. In these few verses, we see hospitality, we see nourishment as a way towards dealing a difficult person in a difficult situation. Now, I don't recommend anyone drives like a tent peg in someone's head, but we see that, like, the haste mattered in both of these cases. So what do we see in Jael and Abigail? What we see is, like, we could say they probably responded in similar ways. They acted on opportunities that God put in front of them. They both acted in haste. They didn't waste time. They used the tools that were given to them. I would argue that Abigail does not know how to do, like, build tents and take them down and do all that stuff, because that isn't who she was, but it was who Jael was. And so you look at it and you're like, wow, they both have wildly different resources at their hand. So the other thing is their highest motive should be honoring God. 1 Corinthians 10:31, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. The highest motive should be honoring God. Number 4, our battle is against a person, not the power of darkness. We can get so confused that what we start doing is we start attacking the person and not the problem. And the problem is they're being difficult. And so what we need to do is have that discernment and say, okay, what is my role right now? Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. That's what we need to do. Jael and Abigail had their priorities straight. They both had such a tiny little mention in the Bible. Like, their mention is really tiny, but they had their priorities straight. There was a problem, and they attacked the problem and not the person. Abigail didn't pause. She didn't call her friends and say, you won't believe what my husband did. She didn't linger. She didn't do any of that. She didn't bury her hand in the sand. She acted quickly and grabbed her food. She didn't repay foolishness with foolishness, or anger with anger, or rudeness with rudeness. So back in verse 3, Abigail was described as discerning. So discerning is to wisely consider, using a filter. What comes in and goes out needs a guard. Using wise judgment. It comes out of our heart. So we need to keep those things in mind. Right now we have information overload with social media and the internet, and people use it to inform themselves and educate themselves and then speak as experts. And so what we need to do is use discernment to determine opinion, not quite right, or what's out of context. And something alone can sound right or justified, but in context you realize, okay, that wasn't what I thought it was. Difficult people can be this way. We're viewing them out of context. We don't understand that their behavior could have happened when they were 6 years old and they're still carrying that baggage. We're viewing it out of context. We're just kind of seeing a symptom of something. We need to be slow to speak and quick to listen. And people also reveal a whole lot in the silence and the things that they're not saying. So let's go to verse 18 through 22. Then Abigail made haste and took 200 loaves and 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep already prepared, and 5 seahs of parched grain, and 100 clusters of grain, and 200 cakes of figs, and then laid them on donkeys. And she said to her young men, "Go on before me. Behold, I come after you." But she did not tell her husband Nabal. And as she rode on the donkey and came down under cover of mountain, behold, David and as his men came down towards her, and she met him. Now, first of all, those are some serious snacks, and it shows us the wealth that Nabal had, but it also reveals to us that he did not need to come from a place of scarcity. He had extreme abundance. Like she said, "Bring me the snacks," and they were just there. And she was able to do that. So we have to make sure that we're not coming from a place of scarcity over abundance. I have a person at work that I'd already worked the job for 2 years. And they came running up to me and they were like all breathless. And they were like, "I need your key. I need your key." And I was like, "Okay, am I being fired? Like, what's going on?" And he said, "I didn't realize till just now I had given you the master key." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "You mean all this time I could have been going anywhere I wanted to go? Seeing anything I wanted to see, doing anything." Now, I'm a rule follower, so I wouldn't have. I obviously didn't. And so I think there's power in that master key. That's the thing that we do. Like, we have the master key, and we don't even act like we have the master key. We're just walking around like, "I only have a key to unlock this one door," and that's it. And that's the only place that you feel and the only power that you have, and that isn't the case. David knew the promises of God, and he responded in haste. So we get to see how 2 people have responded in haste in these verses. And one was for peace. One was for self-gain. One was for pride. So we see David wants to take control. Abigail's allowing God to be in control, and she shows humility. So we're going to actually stop there. And so next week we have like a million things that we need to go over. But there is a homework that's back there. If you all could read all of 1 Samuel 25. And then when you read 1 Samuel 25, answer these questions. I'm going to review them right now so people that are listening, possibly through the Buckrun YouTube channel, they can hear these questions and know that this is the homework. So if you all follow along on your sheet. So after you read 1 Samuel 25, has God placed on your heart that you might be the difficult person in someone's life? So, and if you can't answer that right away, then definitely pray about that to see if maybe that's something that you haven't brought awareness to. What areas did he reveal could use some attention and work? What actions will you take to correct those areas? What verse or passage encourages you in that area of need? And it's not limited to 1 Samuel 25, but just pray for your own heart. Like once you fill that out, pray for your own heart. So second question, thinking of your difficult person in your life, write a prayer for them. For some of you, that difficult person in your own life might even be yourself. You might say, "I'm the difficult one. I'm the difficult one that's making other people be difficult." That might be the case for some of you. But think of the difficult person in your life and write out a prayer for them. You all, there is something about writing a prayer out, not just sitting down and saying, "Hey God, hey, it's Jennifer. I'd like to talk to you about something," but really sitting down and looking at your words, writing them out and refining those words. Remove any accusation that you see in those words, any negativity, or anything that's a self-directed need after you write that prayer out. Not let them be less difficult so it feels better to me. Like, not that. Like, remove any of those things. If they don't know Jesus as their personal Savior, put that in your prayer that they'll know him and God will use you in their life. So say this prayer for your difficult person every day this week. And as the Holy Spirit directs you, go ahead and refine that prayer. I'm sure he's going to reveal various things in that prayer as you're reading it and saying that prayer that probably should be changed and modified. Number 3, in terms of your difficult person, have you acted or spoken in haste? And then you'll need to think that through. Was it for your gain or God's glory? Did you exhibit Nabal, Abigail, or David-like tendencies? And then read Philippians 4. It's real short. It's only going to take you a second. So really, if you read 1 Samuel 25, that frankly is a quick read. So reading Philippians 4 throughout the week should be, a pretty fast little read. But next week, I promise you, we only have one more week, but we will actually close up all of 1 Samuel 25 and really get to the rest of it. But we have a lot to go through. So let's end in a word of prayer. Dear Lord, thank you so much for allowing us to come and worship you. And although we didn't get through everything that we thought we were probably going to get through, we got through exactly the right thing for the time that you allotted us. And whatever pieces that were said today, please let everyone use these to bring honor and glory to your name. Please use these for us to use wisdom and discernment in dealing with our difficult person and what we can do to bring those difficult people that need to know you as you as their personal Savior, that you'll use us in those difficult situations and give us the wisdom to do that, to bring honor and glory to you. We are so grateful for all the abundant love that you give us, and the abundant patience, and the abundant self-control, and the abundant kindness that you give us and that you offer us to share with others. We love you so much. In your name I pray, amen.